His Excellency, Mr. Macky Sall, President of the Republic, his acceptance statement. Your Excellency, sir.
Voilà. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement,
Heads of state and government, dear colleagues,
Monsieur le Président, Félix Antoine Tshisekedi Chilombo,
President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Chilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the outgoing chairman,
le secrétaire général adjoint,
Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations,
la Commission,
Chairperson of the African Union Commission,
Mesdames, Messieurs les ambassadeurs et chefs de délégation,
ambassadors, heads of delegation,
en votre
ladies and
nom et
gentlemen,
au mien propre,
on your behalf and on my own behalf, I would like first of all to thank the government and the people of Ethiopia
l'accueil convivial
for the friendly welcome and the generous hospitality that they accord us once again
dans la cité
in this
légendaire d'Addis Abeba,
legendary city of Addis Ababa, the cradle of our dream of freedom and African unity.
je mesure l'honneur
I do measure the honor and responsibility
à la confiance dont vous venez de
that go
m'investir.
along with the trust that
Ensemble,
you have placed in me, together with the members of the Bureau,
destiné
to steer the destiny of our organization during 1 year. I thank you and reassure you
engagement
of our commitment
concert
to work together and in concert with all the member countries in the exercise of our term of office.
fondateur de
I want to pay tribute to the founding fathers of the organization. 6 decades after,
lumineuse
their enlightened vision continues to inspire our effort to live together and enlighten our march of solidarity towards the ideal of African integration. It is rightly in this Pan-Africanist spirit that President Leopold Sédar Senghor had proposed at the OAU summit of July 1964
d'instituer
to establish
une autorité politique et morale
a
permanente
permanent political and moral authority of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government in order to give a high-level impetus to the conduct of the affairs of the continent. This is how this responsibility of current chairman of our organization emerged, a responsibility which President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Chilombo has carried out with consistency and devotion. Thank you, dear Felix, for the considerable efforts that you have made in the service of our continent. While our union is celebrating its 20th anniversary, this year, we can be proud of the progress made within the framework of the major initiatives such as NEPAD, PIDA, APRM, Vision 2063, institutional reform, the Great Green Wall, AFCFTA, and more recently our coordinated response to COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, we still face many and urgent challenges, whether it relates to peace and security, the fight against terrorism, the unconstitutional change of government, protection of environment, health, and economic and social development. The urgent need for peace and security reminds us of a special responsibility in the fight against terrorism, the peaceful settlement of disputes between member states, and to take care of the situations of internal crisis. We cannot turn our face away from all these lives that are lost, the bereaved families, the millions of displaced persons or refugees, these schools and health facilities that are closed, and disintegrated social cohesion. Our common sense call on us to silence the guns and entrench a culture of dialogue and consultation within the framework of the African Mechanism for Conflict Resolution. In fact, divisions delay our development, and therefore I call for a scrutiny of our conscience in order to have the peace of the brave, in order to devote ourselves to other urgent needs that are a source of concern. It therefore applies to this health crisis linked to the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to ensure as quickly as possible our pharmaceutical and medical sovereignty. I sincerely thank President Cyril Ramaphosa, who with all the necessary efforts in the response to COVID and also access to vaccine, as well as its production in Africa. In the face of the crisis, an ecosystem of hygienical products, pharmaceutical products, medical products has in fact been initiated on the continent. The production of vaccine is already underway in many countries, and others will see. Beyond the response to COVID, we need to maintain this dynamism by maintaining health issues on our agenda in order to support the emergence of an African pharmaceutical industry that can meet our essential needs and face pandemics like HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. I would like also to draw the attention of our summit to the ravages caused by cancer, a silent killer, which causes more than 20 million deaths per year across the world, and more than 700,000 in Africa. We have to add to that 40% of our countries have no radiotherapy mechanisms or equipment to deal with this cancer. In fact, with this concern, the International Atomic Energy Agency has taken the initiative of Rays of Hope in order to support and build the capacities of African member states, particularly in the fight against cancer, thanks to nuclear technology, particularly medical imagery, nuclear medicine, and radiotherapy. I sincerely encourage our countries to support the campaign that is Rays of Hope, as it contributes to attaining the objectives of sustainable development and Agenda 2063. Our urgent needs are also related to the economic situation. Africa is lagging behind in the field of development, despite all the potentialities that we have. 30 million square kilometers, more than 1.3 billion inhabitants, important reserves in water and hydrocarbon, 60% of cultivable and arable lands, 40% of gold reserve, 85 to 95% of metal reserves, chrome, platinum, more than 50% of cobalt reserves, and a third of reserves of bauxite. So in spite of these handicaps, Africa has the necessary capacity and potential to ensure the conditions of its emergence. Furthermore, our continent is making progress. The governments are settling down to task. There is a creative youth which undertakes certain ventures and succeeds. Millions of men and women are working, invest, and are creating wealth. All these positive energies contribute to the structural transformation of the continent by making Africa of modern infrastructures, roads, highways, railways, ports, airports emerge. And the industrial platforms and digital platforms, and rightly within the spirit of this Africa, which is on its way to emerge, should be the theme of our summit, and with the relevant proposal made by President Alassane Ouattara. Build the resilience in nutritional security on the African continent, ensure and accelerate the human capital development and socio-economic development, and this reminds us of our urgent need to ensure food security and food sovereignty by producing more with agriculture, livestock, fishery, through the modernization of our production tools and methods of conservation and processing of our food produce. The improvement of the inputs, the control of water, development of the value chains, and the facilitation of access to markets. The emerging Africa should also rely on its own active forces, youth and women. Youth should remain as the very source of concern of our policies, because they are the majority of the population, and we cannot harness the demographic dividend if our youth are not given the necessary education and training which prepare them for active life. The situation of women, in fact, challenges us because women constitute the other half of the continent. Africa cannot develop when millions of women and young girls continue to suffer violent treatment that is meted out, which is unequal and is discriminatory against women. I want to make an appeal for a greater mobilization of the continent, the public authorities, public opinion, civil society, families, and communities against all forms of violence to women and to young girls and for their empowerment. It is an essential condition for the progress of our continent and our collective well-being. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, if the destiny of the continent is in our hands, it also depends on the political, economic, and financial governance which in fact we are facing in our countries. On your behalf, I will continue this advocacy for a more open multilateralism, which is more transparent and more inclusive, to begin with a more equitable representation of Africa on the UN Security Council in conformity with the Eswatini consensus. I also wish that we concentrate our efforts on the reform of economic and financial, international economic and financial governance for a better access of countries to the development financing resources. Our economies are underfinanced because the rules and rigid procedures impede the access of our countries to consistent resources in the long term and at rates that are excruciating and unbearable for the financing of development. Our economies are therefore poorly financed because they continue to pay interest rates that are very high because of an unequal evaluation of investment risk in Africa and an unequal system. In 2020, for example, while the entire world was suffering the impact of COVID-19, 18 out of the 32 African countries were evaluated by one of the agencies, that is, rating agencies that in fact brought down the evaluation and the rating of African countries, 56 as against 31%. So 20% of the rating parameters of our country depend on subjective factors, whether it are cultural, linguistic, and without any relation with the fundamentals that determine the stability of an economy. All these makes it that the perception of investment risk in Africa remains higher than the real risk, which in fact increases the insurance premium and obviously penalizes competitiveness of our economies. With the support of the Commission, I deem it necessary that we establish a task force of the Union to consider thoroughly the problem of the financing of our economies, including through the reforms of the rules of the OECD and the establishment of a Pan-African rating agency and the establishment of a financial stability mechanism on which the African Development Bank is already working. Other efforts could further be made on the harmonization of our national legislation and the exchange of the best practices in the mining industry and the oil industry for a fair remuneration of our resources. These projects could obviously take time, but I think it is necessary so that we move from claims, complaints to acts by laying the foundation of our efforts. In the immediate future, I will continue our advocacy for the reallotment of the special drawing rights with the historical emission of the SDR, $650 billion, and Africa could only have $33 billion. So, when you look at the impact of the crisis, Africa needs an additional financing of at least $252 billion by 2025 in order to cushion the shock and also to have its economic recovery. Consequently, I will continue our advocacy for the reallotment for African countries and according to the modalities to be agreed of $100 billion of the special drawing rights of the rich countries. And obviously, we need to reach the necessary amount that we need in order to support African economies, and this was already fixed at the Paris conference. A substantial amount of these special drawing rights, together with the IMF, can these be reallocated through the ADB, that is our continental bank, taking into account its role in the development financing and to support our efforts for recovery through quality investments, which obviously will motivate growth. In addition, in order to expand our possibilities of financing the major projects, development projects, it is high time to amend the agreement on the African Development Fund, that is the AD, which will enable it to accede to capital markets and to raise $33 billion, which will obviously supplement its own resources of $25 billion. More, in addition to the ADF resources, it will give more possibilities for development of our countries. I therefore appeal to our partners to ensure the modernization of the African Development Fund and also other similar institutions, more especially as the status has remained unchanged since its establishment in 1972. On your behalf, dear colleagues, I also have the firm intention to state clearly and loudly our message for renewed partnership that can be fairer and more equitable. More than 60 years of the first years of independence, Africa is more than ever before decided and determined to take its destiny in its own hands. Our continent cannot be a field which is just for the feast of others. We are open to all partnerships without exclusion, neither exclusiveness, on condition that it is mutually beneficial and respects our development priorities and our choice of society. In this spirit, I welcome the excellent results and outcome of the China-Africa Cooperation Forum of November 2021 and the Turkey last year. I confirm that our meeting with the European Union will meet with the same success, taking into account the preparations that are underway for this meeting, just like our partnership with Korea, Russia, Japan, and the Arab world, and obviously and without doubt with the United States. All these partnerships will be placed in the same dynamics in the renewed partnership, which is a win-win partnership, our choice of society and our options for our development.
Another
challenge for us is the energy transition within the framework of the fight against climate change and global warming, and Africa is a stakeholder. The margins of COP26 of Glasgow, developed countries have unilaterally adopted the decision to put an end to the external financing of fossil fuel, even the clean ones like gas, while some of them continue to lose more polluting sources like charcoal and fuel, diesel fuel. At the time, with important discoveries over the past years, gas opened for our countries real prospects of universal access to electricity and support to industrialization of the continent, put an end to the financing of gas will deeply affect and thwart our efforts of economic and social development. That is why, by remaining committed to the fight against climate change and global warming, and according to the principle of the common but differentiated responsibility, the joint and differentiated responsibility, it is legitimate that our countries claim for a fair and equitable energy transition. Together, let us mobilize ourselves for the success of COP27, which our brother President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will be hosting this year. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, these challenges, we are going to face them by devoting more time to our discussions on vital issues for our countries, we'll work renewed and rationalize the working methods within the spirit of the institutional reform that we have been carrying out under the dynamic leadership of President Paul Kagame. The imperative need for result, in fact, to implement our reforms in order to improve the performances of the Union, including through I am thinking of the division of labor between the Union, the regional economic communities, and the regional mechanisms, the reform of the legal and quasi-legal organs, the operationalization of the Peace Fund and the African Standby Force, as well as a better articulation and use of our agencies. The Africa that we want is also the one that will also recover all its cultural heritage. The heritage that have been expoliated will remain at the heart of our agenda because it is an integral part of our civilizational identity and which links us to our past and is the path that we have to bequeath to future generations. The Africa that we want to build cannot obviously forget its cultural heritage. Time will not take away our collective memory. The weight of history and the of the present cannot prohibit and prevent our will to remove all the prejudices and that impede our march towards progress. We say yes to the receiving and giving process through dialogue and the dialogue of cultures and civilizations, but there can be no injunction against our civilization and our choices. In this spirit, I will leave no stone unturned in order to defend the interests of our continent with the support of the members of the Bureau and yours, dear colleagues. Thus, and together, we can bring our building block, the continental building block to our dreams, and Africa at peace, free, more united and more interdependent and showing solidarity, and Africa which is standing and which is marching towards greater progress and prosperity. Long live Africa, long live African Union, and I thank you for your attention.
Chers collègues, avant de poursuivre
Dear colleagues, before we continue
nos travaux,
our
je voudrais
meeting,
rappeler
I want to
qu'en raison de
recall
l'engagement du président Tshisekedi
that because of the commitment of President Tshisekedi in promoting
propose que le président
positive masculinity, I want to request that President Tshisekedi be appointed as the champion, that is the champion for to put an end to violence against women.
Je voudrais à présent inviter
At present, I want to call upon the members of the Bureau
leurs impressions
to
en attendant la désignation du premier vice-président, je voudrais
give
inviter le
the
président de la
impressions
République du Niger
pending the appointment of the first vice chairman,
à faire son
and
appréciation
we
sur le
have
suivi de la Zambie,
President
du Malawi, du
Bazoum,
Cabo-Verde, de Sao Tomé,
Cabo Verde,
et
Sao Tome
Seychelles.
and Principe
Monsieur le
and
président de
Seychelles.
la République du Niger, vous avez la parole.
So, President of Niger, you have the floor.
Il s'agit de collègues nouvellement élus comme
These
membres du
are
bureau et qui
rather
participent
the
pour la
newly
première fois.
elected colleagues who are participating for the first time in the assembly, in the meeting of the assembly.
Il s'agit
They are
autant pour moi,
rather
chers
the
collègues,
president, the
des
chairman
chefs d'État, des
corrects
présidents
himself to say these are the newly elected presidents, President of Niger, President of Zambia, President of Malawi, President of Cape Verde and Sao Tome and Principe and Seychelles. The tradition is that they say a few words at the assembly.
Sure. Monsieur Macky Sall, président en exercice
Mr. Macky Sall, the current chairman of the African Union,
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Excellencies, heads of state and government,
Excellences, Messieurs les anciens chefs d'État,
Excellencies, former heads of
Excellences,
state,
Madame la secrétaire générale adjointe des Nations Unies,
Deputy
Amina Mohamed,
Secretary General of the United
Monsieur
Nations,
Moussa Faki
Madame
Mohamed,
Amina Mohamed,
président
Mr. Moussa Faki Mohamed, the chairperson of the African Union Commission,
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
avant tout vous saluer
First of all, I want to
vous remercier
greet
de
you and
m'accueillir
thank you
aujourd'hui
for welcoming me
dans ce
today
cadre prestigieux
within
de
this
la conférence des chefs d'État
prestigious
dans la salle Nelson Mandela que j'ai plaisir à retrouver
assembly of the heads of state in Nelson Mandela Hall, where I can
d'engagement panafricain
draw
incarné
from
par
the
cette grande
values
figure,
of brotherhood,
Nelson
solidarity,
Mandela,
and Pan-African
dont je salue
commitment
la mémoire et le combat exemplaire.
that is enshrined in this great figure of Nelson Mandela, to whose memory I bow.
Je salue
Mr. Chairman,
la présence des
Excellencies,
anciens chefs d'État
I
africains,
want to recognize the
dont le
presence of
président
former
Issoufou
heads of
Mahamadou,
state, President Issoufou
celui-là
Mahamadou.
même qui, au lendemain
He is
de
the
son
one
élection
who,
à la tête
on
du
the next
Niger
day
en
of his
2011,
election at the helm of Niger in 2011, affirmed his commitment to the African Charter, democracy, elections, and good governance, and his commitment to respect the Constitution of Niger, and also by complying with the Republican
que pour la première fois au Niger,
legality.
un président
He
démocratiquement élu
held
passait
his
le témoin
promise.
à un
And for the
autre
first time in
président choisi
Niger,
par le peuple.
we have a democratically elected president who even took over.
Le 2 avril dernier,
On 2 April
j'ai ainsi prêté serment
last year, I was sworn in and I solemnly pledged to continue the work of national construction, the building of the nation within the respect of the democratic principles and rules. And I also pledged in my speech at the inauguration to enhance bilateral cooperation with all the friendly countries and affirm the presence of Niger on the international scene, particularly in the fight for building the Africa that we want for ourselves and the future generations.
vous assurer
I want to reassure you
que je veillerai
that I will ensure throughout my term
c'est comme un pays, le Niger
that my
reste
country,
actif
Niger, remains active in the establishment of partnerships and continental synergies for a more united and better integrated Africa. I would like to seize the opportunity of the 35th ordinary session of the Assembly of the Union to urge my colleagues to sustain sustained mobilization in the fight against terrorism and all the factors of violence that are, in fact, affecting our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome the progress made by our continent, particularly with the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. This instrument should serve to help us develop trade between our countries and put an end to this unacceptable situation, as pointed out by the African Development Bank, that intra-African trade represents only 16% of our external and foreign trade. For this, we should continue the technical discussions, but also pursue the establishment of the PIDA program, that is infrastructure development, and the Yamoussoukro Convention on Air Transport in Africa, as well as the speedy adoption of a harmonized clearance and financial clearance system. Coming from a country of the Sahel facing the impacts of climate change, food insecurity, desertification, floods, I cannot conclude my statement without making an appeal for the honoring of the commitment, that is, of those that are polluting the country and making global warming, and I was stated in Paris, Marrakesh and Glasgow. I express my appreciation to the good work that is being carried out by the chairperson of the Commission, Moussa Faki Mohamed. He is indeed leading this commission with competence and loyalty. May I encourage him, and through him, to all the members of his team. I want to congratulate also President Tshisekedi for the work done as chairman of the Union during 1 year, and wish full success to President Macky Sall, who was just elected as the chairman of the African Union. Long live African Union, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
I thank you, President Bazoum, President of Niger, and I also want to point out that we have some heads of state who have been re-elected, and on behalf of the Assembly, we want to congratulate them. President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, President Patrice Talon of Benin, President Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Republic of the Congo, President Adama Barrow of the Gambia, and President Ismail Omar Guelleh of Djibouti. Now I want to give the floor to President Mengende of the Republic of Zambia. You have the floor, Mr. President.
Pour la suite, j'invite nos collègues à intervenir
I'd like
depuis leur
to
position.
invite my colleague to speak from where he is seated so that we can gain time.
Zambi, vous avez la parole.
My dear friend and colleague, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal and Chairperson of the African Union, Your Excellency President Felix Tshisekedi, President of the DRC and outgoing Chairman of the African Union, Your Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Federal Republic and Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellencies, heads of states and government that are present here today, Your Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Chairperson, 2021 was a year during which Zambia, our country, lost its founding father, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda, and the people of Zambia honored his legacy of peace, indeed unity, by going to the elections, the polls, and ushered in a new government in the same year, our government. Chairperson, we welcome the theme for the 2022 meeting, which aligns with our own administration's key priorities, I mean development priorities, which is increasing the contribution of agriculture to economic growth. Africa, Chairperson, is sufficiently endowed to produce food that should be more than enough to satisfy the continent's nutrition, food security needs, and with increased value addition, it has the unmistakable potential to lift millions of our fellow Africans out of poverty. A problem we've been grappling with for years and years. It has to come to an end. Poverty makes us feel less human, and we should fight it with all the vigor. Chairperson, for our continent to achieve its objectives of economic growth, poverty reduction, and improving the lives of our people, we must be firmly committed to continental peace, security, and stability. What's going on around our continent is concerning many of us, and it's an issue all of us must be addressing with strength, with vigor. It would be true to say, in my own words, Chairperson, that instability anywhere is a threat to stability everywhere. That is a view we hold very, very strongly, and I shall repeat that held view. Instability anywhere is a threat to stability everywhere. Chairperson, we have a unique opportunity to be the generation of Africans and leaders that will actualize economic success with integration and change the African narrative once and for all. We must consider unacceptable the narrative of war, the narrative of instability, corruption, and poverty that has characterized our continent for far too long. This is unacceptable. It must not continue. We must change it, and we have the capacity to change this definition of our continent. It is time to embrace a new paradigm. Let us be anchored by trade, investment, of course, partnerships where we need this. Where there is peace and stability on our continent is the narrative we want. Where there is rule of law and respected by all of us in leadership as a starting point. We cannot expect our citizens to respect the rule of law when we, the leaders, have no iota of any respect for the rule of law. And that leads us into negative vices that have plagued our continent for far too long. We have to bring it to an end. We have the capacity to do that. Let us embrace the aspirations of the youth who desire skills, who desire jobs, business opportunities, and a chance to be heard, a chance to be involved, not once, but all the time. That is very important to us. Let us ensure that the resources of our continent have value added in them and never leave our shores in the raw form as has become a traditional ceremony for years and years. This is unacceptable. It generates us less value than we could if we value added our materials. And we are tired, we must be tired of talking about Africa's potential for years and years. We must actualize that potential. Chairperson, as I conclude, I am pleased to inform you, Your Excellencies, that Zambia is ready to host the 2022 Fourth Mid-Year Coordination in July in Lusaka, and we look forward to welcome all of you to our beautiful country. Chairperson, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention. God bless you all.
Merci. De la République de Zambie, pour votre
President of the Republic of Zambia, for your statement. Dear colleagues,
Dans le chapitre de félicitations,
as part of our congratulations and on your behalf, I'd like to congratulate our colleague Dr. Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, who was brilliantly re-elected.
vous dire toutes nos félicitations.
And I would like to extend all our congratulations to Dr. Abiy Ahmed.
Le plaisir de donner la parole
I'm now pleased to give the floor to José Maria Neves of the Republic of Cabo Verde. Mr. President, you have the floor.
On l'a dit.
Excelências, Sr. Macky Sall, Presidente da
Mr.
República
Macky
do
Sall,
Senegal,
the President of the Republic of Senegal
Presidente em exercício
and
da União Africana,
Chairperson of the African Union,
Senhores Chefes de Estado, Vossas
heads
Majestades,
of states,
Senhores
your
Chefes de
Majesties,
Governo e demais representantes
heads of
dos
government,
Estados-membros,
and other representatives of member
Sr.
states,
Presidente da Comissão
Mr. President,
Africana,
Chairperson of the
minhas senhoras
African
e
Union
meus
Commission, ladies
caros
and gentlemen, dear brothers and sisters,
saúdo-vos em nome do povo de
I
Cabo
would like to
Verde
greet you on behalf
e ao
of the
meu
people
próprio
of Cape Verde
expresso
and my own
a
behalf,
enorme honra que é
and I
para
express
mim
the enormous honor that it is to me to attend for the very first time in the capacity of the President of the Republic of Cape Verde in this August Assembly.
Agradeço
I would like to thank His Excellency the Prime Minister Abiy
ao
Ahmed,
governo e ao povo
to the
da
government
Etiópia
and people of
pelos
Ethiopia
esforços despendidos
for
no
the
sentido de
efforts
tornar possível
to
a
make
realização
possible
presencial desta
the
cimeira,
physical hosting of this
num contexto
summit
ainda
in
fortemente
a
marcado
context
pelas
strongly
restrições
marked
impostas
by the
pela
restrictions
pandemia da
imposed by the
Covid-19,
COVID-19 pandemic,
como pela
as well
forma
as
calorosa e
for
fraterna
thank you for
como a
the warm
representação cabo-verdiana foi
hospitality that was
acolhida
accorded
e
to
tem
the
vindo a ser
Cape
tratada
Verde
nesta
delegation
bela
in this
cidade
beautiful
de Addis
city of Addis
Agradeço
Ababa.
e felicito Sua
Ababa.
Excelência o Presidente
I'd
da
like to thank
República
and
Democrática do Congo,
commend the President of the
Tshisekedi,
Democratic
pela
Republic of
exemplar
Congo,
liderança e
President
orientação das
Tshisekedi,
atividades
for
da
the
União
exemplary
Africana
leadership
durante o ano
of the African Union during a difficult year of 2021.
As minhas mais vivas
I also
felicitações
address
a Sua Excelência o
my
Presidente da República do
congratulations to His
Senegal,
Excellency the President of the
Senhor
Republic of
Macky Sall,
Senegal,
pela
Macky Sall,
assunção da
for
presidência
assuming
pro-tempore desta
the
nossa organização,
chairmanship of our
augurando-lhe
organization,
maior sucesso na
and wish
condução da
him
União
all
Africana,
success in leading this union and accelerating the integration process of our continent. Humanity is facing its biggest threats during this last century. COVID-19 has had high costs to all countries, particularly to African countries. This crisis may represent an opportunity for Africa to engage in a profound reflection and position itself before this and other challenges that will certainly come in the future. Africa has got knowledge, talent, and sufficient resources to produce vaccines and other medicines, and therefore not be reliant on current contingencies and vulnerable when new pandemics emerge. I would like therefore to commend South Africa for launching the first vaccine manufactured in Africa, and I hope that soon enough other African countries will also launch their vaccines. Africa will have a hard time, difficulties in bridging the financing gap to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, and our Agenda 2063 only with public or governmental revenues. It is urgent to rethink our model for development finance in Africa, geared towards realizing the aspirations of these important agendas. If on the one hand the situation calls for the deepening of the expansion of our tax base in order to increase our capacity to fund public policies with our own resources, this also implies the modernization of mechanisms for the financing of our economy by the private sector, both domestic and external, and also fight illicit financial flows. Africa cannot alone have sufficient means to finance the measures for response and recovery from the economic crisis, the pandemic crisis, and climate crisis. There is a need to ensure complementary funding through other forms and sources of external funding, namely through foreign direct investment, international cooperation, appropriate external financial assistance, and the debt forgiveness or reconversion. I do express my concern for the constant threats to peace, security, and stability in our continent, namely in West Africa and the Sahel regions. I refer specifically to terrorism and the subversion of the constitutional order through coup d'etats that have undermined the continent. I'd like to address my full solidarity to the victims of terrorism, namely in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Northern Nigeria, and Mozambique. And I reaffirm strongly the condemnation to all terrorist acts and attempts to subvert the constitutional order, such as the one we've had in Sudan, Mali, Guinea-Conakry, Burkina Faso, and the recent attempt of coup d'etat in Guinea-Bissau. We need to strengthen African capacity to prevent and manage conflicts and strongly promote preventive diplomacy. We also should make our decisions more effective, and therefore the establishment of a multi-level governance system with an adequate division of labor between the African Union, regional organizations and member states with shared responsibilities. This will be a major step to realize the Agenda 2063 and the Africa we want. I believe that Africa has resources, talents, and imaginations to be one of the most important political and economical players in the 21st century. Cape Verde, within its responsibility as a small island and developing state, will always be present. Thank you very much for your attention.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président José Maria Neves de
Thank you,
République de Cabo Verde.
President of the Republic of Cape Verde. And I'm pleased to give the floor to President Cabo Verde of Sao Tome and Principe. Mr. President, you have the floor.
He's not there. Alors, je vais.
The President apparently is not on seat. I will now give the floor to the President Ramkalaven of the Seychelles. Mr. President, I recognize you.
Your Excellency, President Macky Sall, President of the African Union, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege and a pleasure to address this AU Assembly for the very first time since being elected by the Seychellois people as their president in October 2020. From the onset, I would like to reaffirm my personal commitment and that of my country to the values, principles, and ethos of the African Union. These very same values that we commonly share will shape the direction of our continent's agenda to reach our goal of attaining the Africa we want. I thank our host, the government of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, for the hospitality extended to the Seychelles delegation. I would like to thank our outgoing chair, His Excellency President Felix Tshisekedi, for his leadership and his achievements in what has been a very difficult year for all of us. I would also like to congratulate His Excellency President Macky Sall, our incoming president. You have our full support in implementing this year's theme, which is motivated by the emerging socio-economic dynamics that have impacted heavily on our continent, owing to the destructive effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. As the pandemic stretches into its third year, the global health crisis and its associated economic uncertainties have proved to be persistent and continue to pose a challenge to all of us. As long as Africa remains deprived of vaccines, the restrictions on our economic activities will certainly continue to affect our economic relief efforts. The disparity and inequality in accessing vaccines is not acceptable. It is an injustice, and it is morally wrong to accept that in February 2022, only 10% of the population of Africa have been fully vaccinated. We are faced with difficult choices, not least developing our own capacities to manufacture vaccines in Africa. In this regard, I wish to commend the research and development community from South Africa, Egypt, Rwanda, Senegal, and Mauritius, to name a few, for their forward-thinking approach to manufacture vaccines domestically. The supply chain disruptions during this pandemic have proved just how risky the dependency on importation of critical medical supplies, amongst other commodities, can be. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peace, security, and good governance are undoubtedly the essential foundations that create enabling environments for progress and socio-economic development on our continent. Good governance facilitates economic growth, which in turn leads to the much-needed wealth creation to alleviate poverty and improve human development. Those essential foundations, those pillars of the rule of law, of democracy and human rights that shape our present and determine our future are under serious threat. They are being undermined by conflict, strife, insurgencies, and terrorist activities on our continent. They constitute an existential threat to us all. Not only must they be resolutely condemned, but they must, with equal vigor and determination, be combated and eliminated. I must therefore commend His Excellency President Ramaphosa for his undeterred and unwavering commitment towards the vision of a continent that is free from conflict. Let us collectively work towards silencing the guns once and for all. The climate crisis remains the biggest long-term threat facing our planet. The commitments taken in Glasgow are still not enough to achieve the 1.5-degree goal. All evidence points to the fact that small island developing states are particularly at risk from exposure to multiple and compound climate-related risks and with increasing global warming. Recent advances in research reveal greater impacts of sea level rise on coastal populations than originally estimated. With populations, agricultural lands, and infrastructure tending to be concentrated along the coastal zones, any rise in sea level will have significant and profound effects on our livelihood, our way of life, and indeed, our very existence. We, the islanders, contribute less than 1% of global GHG emissions. Yet, if the present situation endures, we will suffer disproportionately from the damaging impacts of climate change, with some of our islands disappearing. Seeds are victims. We refuse to pay the consequences for the irresponsible acts of others. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is certainly not too late for all of us to act on the risks we face and for us to pursue an innovative, sincere, and inclusive transition that protects humanity. More than ever, I am convinced that the African Union has the political will and commitment to lead by example. I thank you.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President Mkolavan of the Republic of Seychelles, for your message. We now give the floor to the President of the Republic of Malawi, Mr. Lazarus Salvera. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Mr. Macky Sall, Chairperson of the African Union and President of the Republic of Senegal, Your Excellency, Mr. Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, outgoing Chair of the African Union, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Muhammad, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as this is my first visit to this historic city since I became President of the Republic of Malawi, let me first express my sincere gratitude to the government and the people of Ethiopia for being such wonderful hosts. Your service to Africa in hosting this long-awaited assembly is both a restoration and a reminder of the mutual hospitality we have all been craving for during the socially isolating waves of COVID-19 pandemic. I would therefore like to also commend Your Excellency, Felix Antoine Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo and outgoing Chair of the African Union, for convening this ordinary session of the Assembly and